Hello and welcome. This is Coach Chris Wilson with CriticalBench.com, and I am having a conversation with my good friend and feats of strength expert, Mike Gillette. And we are here today to talk about Mike's comeback. And this is we're going to get into a lot of things today about mental toughness and coming back from what can be a very kind of life-changing or a difficult event in your life. But today I'm talking to the best possible source for this type of topic. So, Mike Gillette, first of all, welcome to the phone call, my friend.
Hey, Chris, glad to be with you.
And Mike and I have had a lot of these conversations over the years for different reasons, but this conversation in particular is a little bit different. Before I get into one of my many questions for Mike, I first want to introduce you to him in case you haven't heard of Mike Gillette or what he's all about. So this really captures his essence in a nutshell here. Ready? Mike Gillette has a life story that reads like an action-adventure novel. A life which has proven to be his own best case study for goal attainment. He was a poor, scared, and scrawny kid who grew up amidst the backdrop of extreme violence and substance abuse. A kid who would ultimately become an Army paratrooper, SWAT commander, government counterterrorism consultant, bodyguard to Fortune 500 CEOs, and a record-breaking motivational strongman whose feats have been documented by Guinness World Records and Ripley's Believe It or Not. As both practitioner and purveyor, Mike is a peak performance pioneer, and at over 50 years of age, he continues to transcend his own personal limits while teaching others how to do the same. Now, we took that right off the back of our Strength Psychology DVD case, and pretty much everything that we're covering today is under that umbrella of strength psychology or the Psychology of Strength program. And it's really all about how the mind moves the body is the mind, the mind is the body. So, number one, Mike, please tell us, this is all, like I said at the very beginning, this is about your comeback. Tell us about your injury and how you injured your arm. Go back to that day. Just give us a little bit more information about that.
Okay, Chris, I'd be happy to. It's mid-June right now. So going back about 6.5 months ago, it was early December 8th, and I got it in my head to try something I hadn't done before. Now, when you talk about feats of strength, for people who aren't familiar with that sort of catch-all phrase, that refers to things that people might do, like carrying phone books in half, carrying deck of cards in half, bending horseshoes, those types of things, and I do some of those types of things. One stunt in particular I had not yet gotten around to 6.5 months ago was breaking baseball bats. And I thought that looked kind of cool, so I acquired some manufacturer's seconds Louisville sluggers off of eBay because the premium bats are expensive. And I broke a bat, and it wasn't a big deal. It didn't seem to be as hard as I thought it was going to be, so I tried a second one. And on the second bat, there was a loud, audible pop, which I remembered from about 5 years prior, the first time I snapped the bicep tendon. And that's exactly what had happened. I snapped the bicep tendon on my left arm. 5 years previously, it had been on my right arm. So you hear the sound, you have the same searing pain, you know exactly what's going on there. And the advantage is you understand the implications, but the sort of downside to that realization is you also know exactly what it's going to be like trying to come back from it. When I came back from it the first time, I was 49, okay? So I was 53, turned 54 in April. So these things don't get easier the older we get, particularly once you're past a certain age. And there's always that sort of, nagging doubt in terms of, well, just how close to my former self can I get, those types of things. But that's basically how it happened. I wanted to do something. I did it. It didn't go as I had hoped. But those are the kinds of choices that I make because I like to do what I like to do. So
right. But yeah, and nothing. I mean, you've had this fire in you performing feats of strength for several years now. I mean, was it 47 or 48 when you really got into it? I forget.
I was 46 when I was introduced to it, and it took me probably 6 to 8 months of consistent work to get to the point where I started to build a repertoire of the feats.
Right.
But it was, I came to that late in life, and it was really sort of by accident. I was researching feats of strength just in terms of researching the people who did them. I was mostly interested in terms of how you could subject your body to, seemingly superhuman stresses and have the body survive. How does the body not just simply disintegrate under the stress and strain of breaking stacks of bricks, of bending a crescent wrench, those kinds of things. So it was in the study of that and learning about other people who did those things, because initially I never had any thought that I could do that it all seemed too impossible, but I was still fascinated by it. So getting shoulder to shoulder with some guys who were very, very good at those kinds of things really was what sort of stoked the fire, and it was the encouragement that I got from them that made me feel like even if I don't get there, it's probably going to be interesting just trying to get there.
Right.
And that's really how I look at all of this. It's kind of a journey towards self-discovery, and I just continue on and see where that takes me.
Well, and that's what's so cool about, you turn on the TV nowadays and you have shows like American Ninja Warrior and some of these, where these people are just kind of regular people who at some point in their life, they maybe are exposed to something or see somebody do something on television, or a friend of theirs says, hey, why don't you come with me? And then it becomes a real passion for them, and then before they know it, they're performing on television, pushing their bodies pretty darn hard, after, months and years of just, dedication and practice. It's really no different, It's just that you've decided to do it in a more feats of strength kind of way, which is just more jaw-dropping in some regards.
Well, I like that example that you bring up. The Ninja Warrior show. I think there's another show coming out based on obstacle races, that sort of thing. And what I like about shows like that, and what I like even about things such as YouTube, is that it makes these various pursuits a lot more accessible to people around the world. And when you see people doing things, I mean, even if it's something as, I don't want to say working out is mundane, because if you can't work out because you've got some sort of limitation, it's not mundane at all. It's a very critical thing. But whether it's a common task or a slightly less common task, if we're talking about Ninja Warrior, the ability for people to see that being done and think to themselves, why not me?
Right.
And then just open themselves to the possibility that they could have their own journey towards doing something, and then to hopefully step one step at a time and start progressing towards their particular journey. So
no doubt.
The things that I do, I say this a lot, and it sounds kind of convenient to say it. But the things that I do are not about me. The things that I do are really intended to reach somebody, to just to think of themselves a different sort of way, and to think of themselves as someone who might be able to accomplish more than they previously thought. Because the thing about me, despite the big intro at the beginning of our conversation, is I am not biologically programmed to be that person. You know, I had to forge myself into that person. I'm not built to do the things that I'm doing. I just desire to do them, and therefore I find whatever means is necessary, you know, to pursue that. So, you know, whether you're genetically blessed or whether you're just, you know, very average, or whether you've got some things that, you know, make being a physical person seem a bit removed, there's no reason not to try to see why not you. Just see how far you can take yourself. And we get back in the topic of the mind, because it's the mind that ultimately determines how far we go with that.
Yeah, and I want to get to mindset in like one more second. But before I get to that, and you started to go there, the first 5 minutes you knew what you did to your arm. And because you've been through it before, like you said, you'd done it on your right side. This time it was the left arm. 5 years previous, you heard the pop. You got the pain, you know, and then you're thinking, oh my gosh, I got like 6 months plus of just like therapy and just relearning this and strengthening that, and just so take me like, just what was that first 5 or 10 minutes like when you just really kind of got a hold of the situation? And I mean, are you already kind of making like a 10-step program in your head of like what you need to do to get back to performing at your peak?
I wasn't quite that forward thinking.
Okay.
You know, when I was in the moment, it takes a little while to process it. I mean, you know, intellectually, you know that, you know, this has happened, and you know sort of what the calendar is probably going to tell you about that. But at the same time, I'm kind of looking at my own calendar. In this case, I was scheduled to appear with several other Guinness World Record holders that following weekend, and we were doing a big fundraiser in Oklahoma for an Indian reservation. And you know, some of the other guys who were going to be there had done a lot of TV and so forth, and all of them are, you know, deeper into these types of things than I am. So, you know, that was sort of the first thing, was realizing, okay, that event, which I've been preparing for months, okay, that's off the table. What else is off the table? And I had to start sort of going through my list of professional obligations and just, you know, kind of notching things off and making a mental list of, you know, who do I have to notify about all of those things. Yeah. Then it's really, you know, before I could even sort of wrap my head around, okay, what am I going to do once I get the green light from the doctor, is who's the doctor? The last time this happened, I was in Las Vegas, and I ended up with a specialist who only deals with issues between the elbow and the shoulder. That's the entirety of the guy's medical practice. You know, wow. And this is in a city of, you know, 2+ million people. I'm not in Las Vegas right now. So, I mean, I even had concerns about the experience level of who it might be that was going to work on me. Thankfully, those concerns were allayed.
Mike, I'm sorry, I lost you. I just lost you just for a minute. It was a hiccup.
Okay, what do you want me to pick up?
No, continue. So you're talking about the specialist in your area where you live, and your concerns about his or her ability to fix you. Yeah,
because you know, I don't know how common, you know, my behavior is in these parts. In any event, that ended up not being an issue. My surgeon was extremely experienced with bicep repairs. I had a very high success rate, and at the moment it seems that I am on track to be another one of his successes. But that process, waiting for surgery, going through the surgery, you know, each follow-up examination, you know, am I recovering adequately? You know, is there anything I can be doing to sort of expedite things. I was being very attentive to supplementation. I'd talked to some people that were sort of very knowledgeable about tissue repair and so forth. So I was taking some things that I don't usually worry about so much, just mostly in the mineral category, taking a lot of magnesium, taking a lot of aminos, and just based on some things that they had sent me to read, and it seemed to sound. I had actually, because I have a following, I was getting some offers of assistance from people who are, high-level competitive powerlifters and so forth, and they were sharing some information that had worked well for them. Sadly, none of that information was legal, so I was, unable to really sort of avail myself of those. There's a lot of things going on in the world of peptide research that I guess the powerlifting community is very up on. That's not something that I'm really conversant in. But what was nice at that particular moment is, because I'm a pretty transparent guy, and I was sharing, from the time it happened, really up through getting a clean bill of health to start training again from my surgeon. That whole journey is well documented, either in my blog or, social media channels and whatnot. So there were a lot of people who would just check in. How are you doing? Just thinking of you. Hope training's going well. And that was actually really nice. It doesn't sound like a lot, but the accumulative, sentiment, if you will, was just very positive, and it helps keep one in the right headspace, because the interesting thing, when someone like me or someone like you, and a lot of your listeners are very experienced in the training realm, or they're personal trainers, or they compete, is it's almost as though the more you know, that can make the experience that much more challenging to go through. Because when a certain feeling or attitude starts to creep in, you know exactly what it is. It's like, oh, here comes the doubt. Here comes the negativity. Okay, how am I going to mitigate that today? Here comes the conversation with the well-meaning relative that doesn't understand what I do. All I want is, there are so many people who care about me. Nice people, family, friends, although they're all normal people. And, it's moments like these that they use as evidence as to why you really need to stop doing what you're doing.
I was just about to say that. Maybe you've gotten to that age now where it's just time to hang up your hat. Yeah.
And I bet every one of your listeners, if they haven't gone through that, they're going to go through it. If they haven't, it's because they're still young. But eventually, all of your weightlifting or your obstacle course race or whatever it is that you do that makes you you and it's really awesome and cool, it makes certain people uncomfortable. It seems extreme to them, or it challenges them on some subconscious level that they're not even really aware of. And they're always going to look for reasons why you don't need to be doing that. And it's, and because these are usually people that we care about, we want to handle these discussions delicately. But when you do the things that I do, it's easier for those people to feel comfortable making those statements, because there's no real logical reason for some of the things that I do other than I just like to do it. I'm testing myself all the time. That's really the point. It's a little bit different than weekend softball. Everyone understands that.
A little bit different.
Even people that get together and play rugby, people understand that. The things that I do are just a little harder for the average person to wrap their head around. Probably one of the reasons why those things appeal to me is because they're unusual.
Right.
So to answer your question as well as I can, the process for me, particularly the second time around, was really being attentive to my attitude, because the first time it was all an unknown. And it so interrupted my work, because the first time it happened, it was 2011. I was the project manager on an executive protection team. I was immediately on ice. I couldn't drive. I couldn't, administer emergency first aid. I couldn't wield a firearm. All of the things that, made me conversant in the methods of that particular profession, I was now a liability. I couldn't function. It was my right arm. I had to learn how to eat, brush my, all that hygiene stuff with my left arm. I couldn't train, lost weight. It was much more of a struggle the first time around, because I didn't know what was at the other end of the rainbow, if that makes sense. I had a better idea this time around, and even though the first time I thought I had a handle on the emotional aspect, I didn't have nearly as good a grip on things as I thought I did. In retro, because when I sort of re-examined those months, they were very tough on me, and probably because it represented such a major 180 in terms of just the stuff that I did every single day. I don't work as a bodyguard these days. I don't go to an office where my coworkers, everyone in the room can kill everyone in the room. There was an intensity tempo to that life that was very apparent when I was no longer operating at that level. Now the things if I'm writing, or I'm creating some type of training content, or I'm working with other athletes, it's all of that happens at a different tempo than my previous, we'll call, tactical life. So it afforded me a little bit more time to be attentive to the types of thoughts that I really needed to have a handle on, so that I wouldn't get into a state of mind where I'm just not doing myself any good, because I still had to go arm in the sling and do other things. I still had to be on for other people. I still had to be a force of positivity for other people, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense. And so speaking of minds and your thought process and all that stuff, we got to just go over mindset training, and that it's a learned skill. People are not genetically, prone to something like this. This is something that is learned. And so just give us maybe kind of a brief, definition of mindset, what it means to you, and then we can kind of get into a few more of these other, really powerful parts of the strength psychology program.
Well, if we're talking about mindset in the context of strength psychology, we're talking about a strong mindset or a tough mindset. And a mindset is really just a descriptive term that refers to your most common state of mind. Your most ongoing or consistent way of thinking about yourself, thinking about your environment, and how those two things interact. So when I introduce this topic to athletes, particularly to athletes in sports that aren't known for, I'll step back a moment. There are certain sports that people assume that everybody in that sport is kind of a mental hard ass. Rugby, hockey, competitive martial arts, wrestling, football. There are other sports where we don't, the mental factors are very much present, but it's the externals of the sport. If you're a tennis player or a golf player, you play volleyball, we don't immediately conjure up images of, just tough guys or gals, ruthless competitors, but it is. It just looks different because the nature of the sport is very specific. So I find that the less sort of contact there is in a particular sport, the less likely it is for athletes to have been sort of introduced to some of these concepts. So the way that I introduce mindset is I ask them, okay, when you're playing, we'll just say tennis, and it can be anything. When you're playing tennis, how is it that you want to feel? You know, and everybody immediately doesn't answer that question because they're not sure they understand the question. It just sounds kind of woo-woo. I say, no, seriously, when you're playing tennis, how is it that you want to feel? And they'll say something like, confident, because that's a word that gets thrown around a lot, confident.
Sure.
And I say, okay, well, what is that? Describe that to me. And invariably, Chris, they describe confidence and as a feeling, and it's usually a feeling that's comfortable. Or they'll say, well, I feel like everything's fine, or it's good, or they sort of throw out terms that are sort of positive feeling, okay? And those are sort of feeling words, and they're positive words, and they sound right. But when you feel that way, do you usually play well or not? And oftentimes they realize that, well, when I'm just sort of feeling comfortable, I'm not on my game. And there's sort of a disconnect, if you will, between where we raise kids in a cocoon of self-esteem and comfort and pleasantness and participant trophies and honorable mention ribbons and all of that, sort of trying to make everything about their chosen activity, feel like a comfy pillow. And that does not take us to where we need to be to perform well. Now, I'm going to make an Olympic reference because they're coming up. And this may be dating me a bit, but in 1972, a Russian, Soviet actually, gymnast named Olga Korbut comes out and does this mind-bending bar routine. It looks like it's CGI to this day. It's on YouTube. Everybody can watch. It was crazy amazing. And she was an amazing kid. And she was amazing prior to the Olympics. She would hit her routines with a consistency level at about 97%, which means that almost all the time in practice, she wasn't making any mistakes.
Wow.
So she was just, freakish. Then she comes to the Olympics, and she has a good routine, and then a day goes by and she melts down. Big mistakes. Mistakes like she hasn't made in ages. And the reverse engineering of why Olga Korbut, who was as good as that sport got in 1972, could have just a complete disintegration performance-wise. They looked at that, and the conclusion that they came to, and here's the important part, is that when Olga Korbut was training, she would do her floor routine when she was ready. When she felt ready, she would do her bars. She would tell her coaches, okay, I'm good. Whatever it was that she was doing to prepare herself, or maybe she was just waiting to feel confident. That's what she did. And when she felt really comfortable, she could perform well in practice. But practice does not play out the way that international level competition does. You go as soon as the judges wave their little flag. They don't care if you feel ready or not, or if you want to quick and run to the bathroom one last time. None of that matters. You have to go. And it was her training that was ultimately blamed for not adequately preparing her for the mental rigors of international competition at an Olympic level once every 4 years, the highest stakes that there are, in competitive sport. She wasn't ready, and she wasn't ready because the mental toughness wasn't there. it was there in terms of the discipline. The skill level was there, but that the secret sauce, the magic ingredient that limits most of us is not that we don't know what we're doing. It's that we don't have that extra piece, to push on when things are difficult, to function when things are scary. And so much of sports psychology is, in my opinion, backwards. It's all designed to create the comfy pillow for the competitor. The competitor doesn't need a comfy pillow. The competitor needs to understand that you can be not ready and still go out and crush it. You can be nervous and still go out and crush it. You can be scared out of your mind and still turn in an amazing performance. Because there are people who are doing amazing things every day under less than optimal circumstances. You can't tell me that every brain surgeon feels 100% comfortable every time they crack open the skull of another human and start messing around up there.
Yeah.
I can't imagine they ever feel comfortable. I don't want them to feel comfortable, and they probably don't want to feel comfortable because they know that that's where you get slack. You have to be up to the task at hand. Whether that's being in the gym and going for a PR in a particular lift, or anybody who's competing to do anything against other humans, you need to find ways to get yourself to that point. And the way that you get yourself to that point is by doing hard things, doing things when you don't feel 100%, doing things when you're not comfortable.